Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the Yoni and Shimon show, the premier podcast for staying up for everything, all things Web3. And for today's fourth episode, we'll be diving into the realm of decentralized and open source AI. So recently there's been a lot of spark around commoditized machine intelligence, distributed computing, and the myriad of use cases AI could be solving within the blockchain communities. So let's kind of get started on the problem itself. There are obviously a lot of criticism and hype within the community because people want to know how decentralized and open source AI is actually solving any real problems. There's obviously like big incumbents like Google with Bard and OpenAI with ChatGPT. What is the real problem here that something like decentralized AI is actually looking to solve?
So I think it's just powerful, like it's just super powerful, and this power needs to be owned and belong to people. So because it's so powerful, it will, like I think problems in society are coming from mainly from money differences, and this is a super powerful force, and if it will be, and it should be owned by everyone. So we can go over the stack, but everything should be open, like the ability to do inference, models, everything should be open. And if everything will be open, then people could have this kind of huge force themselves.
Yeah.
Right now, it's very similar to what happened in the 2007 2008 with Facebook and Google, and you see now that there is a few companies that worth $1 trillion+ because they own the data of everyone. So in the same way, also AI can be such a big disaster, but much bigger disaster
Yeah.
than we see in social networks, because it's much more powerful than just posts.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this as well before, the importance of, objective information. Maybe you can kind of build off what happened with those tech giants in 2007, 2008, because there's obviously a lot of risk of data privacy, ownership, censorship, and all these things with very strong models that can really dictate how the future of humanity is played out. So what do you think that we could be using this decentralized platform for to kind of solve those issues of we don't want a government or a central entity, controlling all this intelligence that could be used for potentially malicious things.
Yeah, for sure. So first, let's speak about what open source AI means. Like,
Yeah.
what is open, and what is good for. So when you are speaking about AI, you have a few things that are either open or closed. You have the data sets that are being used in order to train the models. You have the models that are the algorithms. Then you have the weights, meaning like you have a lot of parameters, and then what is the weight of each parameter. The weights are basically determines the training of the model. If the weights are in certain way, the model will be trained in certain way, and so on. And then so I think that's the type of things that could be open or closed.
Yeah.
And then like decentralized is the ability to access those things without relying on a centralized entity, and also let people incentives for doing things. Like, for example, right now there is no incentive for big companies to open their models.
Yeah.
So I feel like a crypto provides incentives to do so, and also in other parts of the stack that is not the infrastructure, such as AI agents, which are basically bots that can interact with LLMs to self-improve. those agents can also be self like basically rewarding each other for doing certain tasks, and crypto can also be good for that. But I think in general, first you need to open things. Like if everything is open, everything is up for grabs by everyone, and the human intelligence can access those things and make usage of those things and for different purposes. And I think that's very important, because then people can claim the power and not the power is not held by very few, like it is right now.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we could kind of formalize what those categories look like, because in the last episode we obviously talked about the importance of picking categories within a space and developing a thesis around that. Kind of like you alluded to within the decentralized and open source space, there are things like commoditized compute, where you have projects like Akash and Render, but you also have like commoditized intelligence, where there's Bittensor, which is basically pitting models against each other so that the best one can be found and then you get rewarded. So like ChatGPT and Open or Bard can go against each other, and the best model can come out. There's obviously like automation, like fetch, service layers, etc. What are you bullish on? And can you kind of give an explanation on where you see this going in the next couple of months, years, whatever it may be, in terms of the use cases that are actually important?
Yeah, sure. So let's jump directly into coins, directly into
Yeah, because
crypto.
that's what everyone cares about.
Yeah. Categories that you can bet on in AI, in crypto, and what exists now, what does not exist yet. So right now I can think of, I think, 6 categories or 5 categories, and some of the categories are in the app layer, and some of the categories are in the infrastructure layer. So in the infrastructure layer, currently, there is storage, which is Arweave and Filecoin are the main ones. And why storage is important? Because you need to store those models somewhere. You can store it in the blockchain, but you can also store it locally. So there is a lot of progress on making models very small, and then if models will be very small, you can store them locally. So one is storage. Second is inference. Inference is basically the ability to query models, but while you querying, not using AWS or not using any centralized provider. So when you are asking ChatGPT something, what ChatGPT is doing is accessing their cluster of computers and basically asking the model for you and giving you back the answer. So I think that this query is important, because in a world of decentralized AI, like you don't want to use any centralized point. So for inference, there is not much. Actually, Tau, Bittensor started from that, but right now they're doing other things as well. But inference is important. Right now there is one company that I can think of, nothing public yet, but Ritual by Niraj from Expolychain is doing that, but they're still private. I think they will take a few months until they will launch something. And I feel like there will be probably others. Okay, the third one is basically the holy grail, like decentralized co-owned models. Now, models is super powerful. Why? Because models is the brain, trained model is the brain, and if this brain can be owned by everyone, it can be great. So I think right now the only thing that you can bet on that is the decentralized model is Bittensor. It's doing it by a weird way of basically ranking different models against each other, and the one with the highest value gets more of the reward, but they're also using the tau to incentivize other tasks.
Yeah.
So it's not clean. It's not clean. But currently, tau is probably the most mature, bet on those areas. Then there is the areas that I think will become a commodity, that is decentralized compute. So decentralized compute currently, you have IONET, you have Akash, you have on Solana, you have NOS, and you have several others that are going to, like launch, I think, in months, that raised a lot of capital. And obviously you have render. So render is very mature.
Yeah.
Okay, it's now on the application layer, it's also pretty cool. So basically the main thing that you can see on the application layer is agents. So agents are basically applications with the backends as models. So the model is the backend. So those are applications that are speaking that are powered by models, and on that front you have a couple of projects. One is Autonomous, that is a framework for agents. One is Gelato, that is framework for automation. Gelato is important because it's Gelato is interesting because it's not a new coin. It's automation, but will mostly be used for these kind of things. Fetch.ai. Who else? Maybe Singularity.
I think there's also OLAS, right?
Yeah, Autonomous. I mentioned.
Oh yeah.
Another one is Forta, that is also automation, but it's not exactly useful for AI per se, but probably for other things. So I think that this is a current stuff, but if you think about what will happen, many things can happen, many things can be developed. One is like doing local models, incentivized local models. That's massive. Basically incentivize people for cleaning, like data labeling of data, and open sourcing data sets. So there is a lot of other parts in the stack that are not yet exist and will exist probably in the upcoming month or year. But I feel that crypto have a very big part in incentivize people to open source things.
And I think that's a great segue into kind of what we've spoken about before in terms of the imbalanced memes and how there's a supply and demand inconsistency, because there are real problems in the centralized AI space that are not being solved. It's just a matter of, do you have the expertise to know what the real problems are that need fixing with a decentralized solution? I guess my next question is, this is a relatively new topic that has gained a lot of traction in the last, couple of weeks, even like days, with Bittensor doubling in price over the last like 10-ish days. Do you have any insight over the history of, it could just be general AI, but maybe you can speak on these projects as they've evolved, because I know they've been part of your thesis for quite a long time. What do you think is something, or like, what is key in the development of these projects that make them attractive for investors? Because there's obviously like all these problems that are emerging, but again, kind of knowing which ones are important should guide how you develop a thesis. So what do you recommend to the viewers for kind of looking for projects in this space? Because it's obviously, there's a lot of information and it's all jumbled on Twitter, but it's very hard to, navigate, especially like for me. I don't really know where to go besides like the name ones that you've listed.
Yeah, I think it's going back to our previous conversation, and I think so it's just another category. AI is no different. from any other emerging category, and you need to think about that in that framework. So obviously you have the category. Within the category, it's much better to bet on infrastructure and not bet on application. And within the infrastructure, you need to bet on infrastructure that are harder to replace. So things that are less obvious, harder to replace, more technical, more original. You don't see many people are doing it. That's the difference between decentralized compute and with Bittensor, because decentralized computer is a lot, and like Jensen, Render, Akash, like there will be many more, and it's not only AI, it's just like decentralized AWS, which is great business, but anyone can do it basically. So I would say looking for teams that have very high caliber and that have a higher chance of becoming a category leaders. And I think so far we see Bittensor as such, but very fast we can see someone else. Like for example, if you look at open source AI, you see companies like that built massive models, like Mistral, for example. They can come to crypto and they will easily be like
market leader,
a few $1 billion, like a market leader. And other projects can also do the same, like Hugging Face, for example, right? So I think you always need to be looking who is most likely to be category leader, and based on what they are building, that is less trivial infrastructure as opposed to more easy to replicate infrastructure. And another thing that is interesting is what is becoming relevant to AI. For example, like if you look at Gelato, if you look at Arweave, those projects are exist in the market for forever. But AI give them use case that are new use case, they become meaningful part of the stack, and they are solid projects. So worth looking on that as well, because that's lowering the risk. You have something to rely on, like if those even if AI I mean, there is no such thing that AI will not work, but if those projects will not be a leader in AI, then they can still be a leader in storage or automate other things.
And then I guess like procedurally, how are you staying up to date? Because I know for me, it's very hard to be immersed in the space, especially as it's kind of like a tangent and I'm not super knowledgeable within the traditional AI realm. What do you recommend for viewers in terms of just very simply like staying up to date and becoming knowledgeable in the space if this is a category that they're interested in pursuing?
I think very simply communities, like you need to find 3 or 4 communities of people that are obsessed about these things. Participate in the Discord, see what they're talking about, follow the rabbit hole of what they are talking about. For example, Bittensor is a great community, and I will add in when we'll publish that a few links. But basically, all of the tokens that I mentioned, they are doing a lot of writings, a lot of they mention a lot of interesting hubs. So you just need to follow those communities. Like inside of those communities, there are people that are obsessed and they live in the future. You need to be around those people to also be living in the future. So like with decentralized AI, like spend time in Autonomous Discord, in Fetch Discord, in Akash Discord, in Render Discord, in Bittensor Discord. And then on the normal things, try to find other open source companies like Midjourney, like Mistral AI, and like Llama, and like also what's the name of this company that built agents? LangChain. So for example, like LangChain, all of those projects have people that are very into the future, and they can tell you what is interesting. So that's with AI, I guess. Like but that's also with everything like that. I'm interested in. I'm trying to find people that live in the future and ask them, what do you think I should read? Where do you think I should look? Like, what communities you think I should be in?
Yeah. And then I guess just as like an overview question for me, there seems to be a lot of overlap of what can be centralized versus decentralized. What do you think the problems that will remain in the centralized space are? Because there's obviously a lot of criticism in terms of, is this a real issue that needs to be solved? And in my opinion, it is. But there are lots of critics that are saying, Hugging Face is sufficient for an open source, and these decentralized compute models are not necessarily useful. What do you think about that narrative in terms of not pushing over to, or even considering like decentralized models? Like, what do you think the catalyst is as well for eventually switching over, to very decentralized systems?
Yeah. What the catalyst, I don't know, but the main reason why people are not doing everything open source is incentives, is lack
Yeah.
of incentives.
Mm.
People don't have a way to make money from closed source
Yeah.
models, so they are just building a product. Look at OpenAI, but also others. So open source always had a problem with monetization.
Yeah.
That's why social networks was developed in that way as well. Like, the only way to basically monetize social network was through the data, and I think that's in AI it's the same. And but crypto can give AI really good alternatives for monetization.
Mm.
And monetization of everything, like taking the taking the power of the crowd, and get the audience to pay for certain things, and to add knowledge to certain things.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about these things. Bittensor really leading the way in incentives. Maybe we should cover specifically some of the ways that Bittensor are
Mm.
incentivizing different types of tasks.
Yeah.
uh, but I think like centralized way is the easiest way to make money, because you are hiring the people that are doing the work, and
Mm.
then you're selling the product. But in a decentralized model, you can pay the people that are doing the work with stock. So the people that are your clients and people that are your shareholders are the same people that are your employers, or people
Yeah.
that are building it. Like, so it's kind of flipping the means of production with the clients, everyone becoming the same thing. Yeah, so I'm very excited to see like what other infrastructure pieces, like like data labeling even, uh, can become incentivized. Because I think open source right now is just, people are open sourcing things because they want other things. Like Llama, they want to hire people for Facebook,
Mm.
Llama decks. And then you have Mistral, they get grant from the government. So everything is sponsored. Like right now, open source is sponsored.
Yeah.
But the world biggest things are not relying on charity. The world biggest things are relying on incentives.
Yeah.
And I feel like like with a clean, and good incentives, we could see massive companies, massive protocols that
Mm-hmm.
are emerging, uh, bigger than, even bigger than Bitcoin. Like, we can see $1 trillion protocols emerging from those things. Even Bittensor can be
Yeah.
that. Obviously,
But I
not
think we
invest.
should talk about Bittensor because it's a great case study in terms of incentives beyond AI. Like what they've done with their bounties program in terms of incentivizing builders to use their um, decentralized compute is really smart in terms of paying people in Tau which then, obviously creates like this flywheel for the price of the actual token. And then they've actually created real use cases. Like they have the neural internet, which is, competing with ChatGPT at this point, and the Twitter reply bot, which, is extremely active. And they basically proven that people are using their product, but now we have a set of huge open source developers who are being, monetized for their production. And again, like with blockchain, you can basically say this is the objectively best model, and we're gonna, allocate based on that. So if you have the best model, we'll pay you. I think it in the long term, these are the projects that are going to succeed. And rather than, we've always focused on these categories, but underlying these different categories are projects that just have great incentive systems, and they just align between the builders, the communities, and the token holders, which is, I think, is just fantastic, and is personally why I'm quite bullish on,
What is the 5 tasks that Bittensor is incentivizing for that you're the most excited about? Like what are some examples for mechanisms that currently work within Bittensor that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm most excited about the bounties program. It's like robust at this point, and basically people are rewarded for building atop of Bittensor. This has been done like historically in a bunch of projects, but in terms of increasing the use cases for a project, that's like a beautiful way to do it. And yeah, I think that creating also things that are novel, like other uses of AI, is great, but especially for onboarding in terms of an early project, creating something that's very familiar, such as like a ChatGPT interface, which basically their neural internet is a great way to bring some additional traction to the project. I think that overall, it's really fantastic. And the community is obviously like really strong as well. Discord is always interacting in terms of use cases of the project rather than like shilling about tokenomics, which I think is a really strong indicator that people want the product and are bullish on the narrative that decentralized AI is actually important. And that's kind of why I think your answer to the previous question was really great in terms of there is a use case for it and people are now adopting it, but it's kind of, let me show you the problem before, I have to uncover it myself, because likely it's going to be too late, if a centralized entity takes control of one of these large models and then they can do whatever they want. So I agree. I think that something like Bittensor could eventually become like a blue chip in terms of market cap, and people are actually using it.
Yeah, very interesting. And also things can be emerging out of this community.
Yeah, and I think that there will be a bunch of spin-offs that use the existing infrastructure that Bittensor has built and create even more interesting use cases in the future. But again, like a huge indicator for me is, what are the developers in the community doing? Are they engaged? Are they active in the Discord? Are people actually caring about the use cases and not just trying to make a quick buck? And that seems to be the consensus in the community. So I'm very passionate about it. Yeah. Do you have any other like closing remarks or general advice that you would give to people that are looking for this category in the future in terms of their personal accounts and investments as we enter this bull run?
I think we'll just add on like when we publish it, like a bunch of links, and I just recommend to people getting into those communities and trying to find projects that are emerging from the community. So I think there will be new tokens that are not exist yet, that are emerging from Bittensor community, that are emerging from like other projects, and just I guess recommending people to be in those places, and we're still early, so don't be rushed into things too big. like you still have time, and yeah, I think that would be the.
Okay, great. So just as an overview, in this episode, we've covered the categories of AI and crypto and the actual use case of decentralized compute, storage, and commoditized intelligence. Specifically, we covered the subcategories of like infrastructure, inference, models, decentralized compute again, and then applications using agents. And specifically, Yoni has graced us with how to bet on AI in terms of looking for a first mover advantage, the importance of communities, and in the Substack post, we'll be posting references for ways to get involved and stay up to date within all updates in decentralized AI. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you on the 5th episode.